All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling here. Welcome everyone to tonight's session, which is highlighting disaster assistance programs, the Emergency Relief Phase 2 and the Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. So thank you so much. We're going to jump right in. We know that it's evening time and we do appreciate your time and respect that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and let you know that we will be recording this session as well and sending that out to everyone who is registered. So my name is P. Wade Ross, and I am actually with the Texas Disaster Assistance Coalition as one of its founding members of the committee. And I will be one of your two co-hosts tonight. Joining me is, as you see here, is Joshua Coleman, State Outreach Coordinator for Farm Service Agency. And he's really here to interject and really provide a deeper insight on some of the information that we're going to be sharing with you. So we'll jump right in. And really our agenda tonight is to discuss both programs that I spoke of. We'll start off by kind of describing the differences between the two, which I know sometimes can be confusing or sometimes we get mixed up between those two. So we'll kind of highlight some of those differences and then go into an overview on each of the programs that we are highlighting tonight, and then talk about next steps and open it up for Q&A. And I'll let you, Joshua, tell me if you actually want to, do you prefer to do a Q&A maybe after we highlight each program, or would you rather do that Q&A at the tail end?
We can probably do it at the end. Will probably be good, I think, so that way we can kind of cover both programs since they're a little bit similar in nature to some extent. But I think if participants have any questions kind of as we go along, they can kind of go ahead and drop those in the chat, and then so we'll kind of already have those to kind of address once we get to the Q&A part.
Perfect. All right. So there you go. We'll do Q&A, but as questions come up as we're going through some of the presentation here, please feel free to brain dump it in the Q&A section below. We'll make sure that we keep an eye on those, both Josh and I, to read those during the Q&A, or you'll have the opportunity also to raise your hand at the tail end once we do the Q&A. So we'll go ahead and get the ball rolling here. So up first is what's the difference between ERP2 and PARP? So really for ERP phase 2, one of the differences is it's only for crops as far as eligibility. In contrast, the PARP program is for both crops and livestock for the eligible commodities there. So I didn't know, Joshua, if you wanted to go any deeper in that, but that in a nutshell is one of the differences there.
Yeah, I think that's a good main difference between the two to get started with.
All right. And another difference is the ERP2 phase 2 program is designed to address the impacts of natural disasters, whereas the PARP program is designed to address the impact of the pandemic. And the third major difference, I would say, is that ERP phase 2 is based on tax year, whereas PARP is based on calendar year. So with those main differences, let's take a deeper dive into the Emergency Relief Phase 2 program. And as you can see here on the slide, the sign up is open through June 2nd of this year. So yes, you are reading that correctly. We have a fairly short window here, which is why we wanted to make sure that we at least got this information out. So if you feel like, based on this info session, that this is something that you're interested in and want to learn more, we do encourage you to make sure that you reach out to your local FSA representative, and we'll talk about that a little bit more down the road here. All right, so question here is, what are some of the highlights of the ERP Phase 2 program? Okay, and really, you see here some of the highlights are that ERP Phase 2 is a revenue-based program that accounts for crop losses due to qualifying disaster events that have caused producers to have a decrease in revenue. So the disaster needs to have occurred either in the calendar year 2020 or 2021. And really, this program is designed to help fill some of those gaps of previous assistance programs. So if I have that right, or is that the part? Am I messing up there, Joshua?
No. Yeah, not too bad. But no, yeah, PARP is covering kind of those other gaps from the pandemic programs.
Okay,
and yeah, ERP
gotcha.
is focusing on those natural disaster losses.
All right, perfect. So anything else you want to interject there? If not, I'm gonna go on to the next one, which is, what is the first step of determining if the ERP2 program fits me as a farmer, my situation? And really, the first step is, did you have a qualified disaster event in 2020 or 2021? And Joshua, I'll let you kind of interject or elaborate on some of these events here.
Sure, yeah. So with this list here that's on the screen, this is generally the list of natural disasters that producers can claim for the Emergency Relief Program Phase 2 as being an eligible cause of loss for those years. With this, especially most of the ones that we'll probably see here in Texas, drought being a very severe one last year across the state, but also going back a few years, depending on which parts of the state you may have been in. And so specifically regarding drought, Farm Service Agency, we utilize the U.S. Drought Monitor, which weekly updates the information on the drought conditions across the nation. When that tool is published each week, it does identify where counties range on the drought monitor, everywhere from being having no drought at all the way to being exceptionally dry. To have be considered as having a qualifying drought, counties must be have had a D2 drought for either 8 consecutive weeks or had been ranked a D3 or a D4 according to the U.S. Drought Monitor at any period of time. And it doesn't have to be the full county that needs to be that. It can just be any portion of the county that meets any of that criteria, which will make the county eligible for qualifying drought. Now, some of the rest of these, excessive heat, so there are some state-specific guidelines on what we consider excessive heat here in Texas. But more frankly, again, some of the things we may differ depending on where you are in the state. So excessive moisture may be something that we may see more along the coastal side in East Texas. Apparently flooding also in those same areas. Obviously, we did have the freezes and, of course, the Winter Storm Uri back in 2021. And so this program is kind of designed to help producers kind of offset some of the losses that they may have had as a result of that winter storm. But also wildfires, again, other winter storms, windstorms, those also eligible causes of loss that could qualify as disaster events for the Emergency Relief Program Phase 2. And so if you had any of those losses, then that may allow you to be able to at least meet this check mark for the program to meet the eligibility requirements for it.
All right, that's some good info there. And I know, just talking to several of the farmers I know in this central Texas here, where a lot of drought, there's going to be a lot of interest there on that drought qualification. So thank you for sharing that, along with some of the freeze and winter storm as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about bench year revenue. Bench year revenue is the amount of allowable gross revenue from tax year 2018 or 2019 that represents a typical year of revenue for the producer's operation. So there, I know that's always a question because that's not a term that farmers use regularly, benchmark year. But basically in a nutshell, Joshua, would you say this is something that is a benchmark year is just what you're comparing losses to, correct? Revenue losses.
Correct. So that benchmark here is another way to look at it. It's just going to be in a normal year,
Okay.
what producers would have been expected to make in terms of general revenue. I also hit a little bit just on tax year right quick, because I know tax year, again, maybe another one of those terms that producers may not be all that familiar with. But for tax year revenue, again, revenue-based programs are new to Farm Service Agency and us administering those. And so for the tax year, that can be it can vary across the board because it becomes producer specific. And so it would be based on what their individual calendar year is for their operation, which can span multiple calendar years. And so, for example, the federal fiscal year goes from October 1st to September 30th of the following year. And so producers may have a similar type of tax year like that they operate with, or they may have one that's aligned with the calendar year, January 1st to December 31st. And so with that tax year, it's just going to be dependent upon how they're structured for their tax purposes and what their fiscal year looks like for their specific operation for ERP2.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Disaster year, benchmark year, that sometimes is we start rolling those two together. Okay, thank you. Let's see here. So I did want to touch on for the underserved producers, there are programs out there for eligibility for an increased payment, and really to qualify for increased payments without getting too deep in the weeds there, a farmer or rancher must have certified their status on the form. It's a form called CCC 860. I don't want to get too much on those forms there. I know that throws people off there, but you do want to make sure that you certify your status as either associate disadvantaged, limited resource, beginning veteran farmer, or rancher certification. And I think it probably is a good idea, Joshua, to kind of elaborate on this slide as well as far as the terms here.
Of course. So social disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and I know quite a few may have some different views on that term specifically, but for our programs and for legality purposes, it's the term that's mostly associated with most of our programs that you'll see. But the definition for social disadvantaged farmer and rancher is a farmer rancher who is a member of a group whose members have been subjected to racial, ethnic, or gender prejudice because of their identity as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. And so members of those groups include American Indians or Alaska Natives, Asians or Asian Americans, Blacks or African Americans, Native Hawaiians, and or Pacific Islanders, Hispanics, and women in that category. Limited resource farmers and ranchers are those who have a direct or indirect gross farm sales that don't exceed the applicable amount for the year, which changes. So I think this year it's around 177,000. And then they also have a household income that's at or below the national poverty level for a family of 4. And we looked at information for each of the 2 preceding calendar years. And so for example, 2023, we'd be looking to see if producers met that qualification for 2022 and 2021. A beginning farmer rancher is one that has operated a farmer ranch for less than 10 years. And then a veteran farmer rancher is one that either has not operated a farmer ranch for more than 10 years or has obtained their status as a veteran during the most recent 10-year period. And so that's generally the definition for individuals to meet all of those. Now, for those that may operate as entities, so if they might be an LLC or a partnership or other type of entity, then at least 50% of the members of those specific entities must meet the applicable definition for them to be able to meet the criteria for the underserved category.
All right. So good info there. Thank you for hitting that. So since this is a revenue-based program, I guess the next question would be, what is considered allowable gross revenue? So let's hit on that slide real quick here. So these are some of the things that would be considered income from sales of eligible crops before expenses. Certain government program payments is also allowable gross revenue. Includes revenue from all eligible crops if one crop suffered from a qualifying disaster event. So, and then it's based on the tax year applicable to that revenue. But I want to go back, if you could, Joshua, and hit on the includes revenue from all eligible crops if one crop suffered from a qualifying disaster event. Can you kind of elaborate on exactly what that means?
Right. So with this program, like I say, it's looking at all the crops that are involved in the operation itself. And so although, like say, it might have just been one crop, let's say a producer that does corn and cotton, if there was a loss to the corn, but there wasn't one to the cotton, we still want to be able to record that information applicable to the application where it produces all the information that, again, would fall under that definition of being allowable would be included on that application as part of that revenue.
All right, thank you. So within the ERP phase 2 application itself, it's called the FSA 521, and there's a very good two-page table that really explains what to include and exclude as allowable gross revenue. So just wanted y'all to know that there are some tools available. And it's important to remember that your gross revenue must exclude the sale of any livestock or livestock products. That's not a part of this emergency relief phase 2 program. So anything you want to add on this one? Just slide it off, Joshua.
The only thing I'll also add to that is that there's this link there on the screen that you see that says on the second one on the left that says ERP phase 2 allowable gross revenue worksheet. That's actually an online tool that we are encouraging producers to utilize. It walks a little bit more through the information on what those allowable revenue sources are and kind of how you include those inside of your application. And so generally you can follow through with that tool online with completing that information that's there, and then it'll automatically generate you that FSA 521 form. There are also instructions that are included within on that online tool as well. And so it does help to answer some of those questions that you may have when it comes to filling out the application and working with the program.
All right. And would you suggest, if for those of us who feel like this may fit us, but it is a little bit intimidating, to call FSA office first and have someone walk you through as well?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah. So producers, they can call the local FSA office and they can answer some general questions about the application. One of the things with this is that, as with all of our programs, there are producer certification programs. And so our staff may not be able to tell producers what numbers they need to put, necessarily aware of what numbers should equal out to, but they can help producers with answering where they should go on the application and going through and helping them to decipher information that way. And so the local FSA office, like I said, they'll be equipped to answer those questions. So between the information there from your local office and then any assistance that's available through the tools online, hopefully all those kind of be able to get you all your questions answered, and then hopefully allow you to get that application submitted successfully.
All right, so you guys heard it there. It's there's certain things that FSA cannot do, that they cannot tell you specific information to put in there. If I'm hearing this right, Joshua, correct?
Right.
All
right. Correct.
Perfect. All right. So also just know that it's worth noting that the Schedule F in your tax returns, Form 1040, which basically is your tax return, your personal tax returns, is a document that most individuals and entities who cultivate, operate, or manage farms for gain or profit use to report their income and expenses, and may be very helpful. It's a piece of information to have handy with you as a reference point to assist in figuring out what your allowable gross revenue is. So if you do fill out your Schedule F regularly, we do recommend that you have that form handy as you're going through filling out your information. However, if you happen to not use a Schedule F to determine your allowable gross revenue, it is not required. There's other ways there. I don't know if that's something we cover in this thing, or if we want to go down that rabbit hole, Joshua, but I did want to put that out there.
Yeah, so definitely, understand that not all producers do file a Schedule F, and so there will be some situations where producers again won't have that form, but they may have other documentation that they do keep to justify the revenues that they are listing on their applications. And so generally with that, again, now with the application itself, is not required that you have to submit your Schedule F with your application or any other supporting documentation. But it is important for whatever substantiating information that you did utilize to fill out the application, that you do keep track of the information. It could be requested if the application is pulled for a spot check, or if additional information is needed, and the information can likely be found within that Schedule F or whatever other documents were used to generate that revenue. So it's important to make sure that what you are recording, that you do have documentation of it, and that you also keep up with that documentation in the event that any questions come up, or if your application is pulled for spot check down the road at some point.
All right. And I was hesitant to put this slide up, but I went ahead and did it anyway. But just wanted to provide a summary of the payment calculations. So upon approval, payments will be issued using a maximum payment amount. Maximum payment amount will be $125,000 per program year. So that's in this particular case, that's 2020 and 2021, minus any phase one gross payments earned for that program year. Okay. Maximum payment will be prorated between specialty and other crops by the percentage of expected revenue certified by you, the producer, and the maximum payment amount will not apply after sign-up concludes and final payment factors are determined. So I think I have a note here that Joshua, you did want to do a quick side note on this as well.
Right. And so, and definitely, like say, it gets, a little into the weeds a little bit, but hopefully not so much. But one of the things with this program, again, since it is a revenues-based program, part of the reasoning with that is that it's designed to make the assistance that producers get a little bit more specific to the operation. And so if you may not have had a revenue loss that calculates payment in those years, then you may not receive a payment through this program possibly. But again, if you did have a revenue loss that's great enough that may calculate an estimated payment, then you may receive something through this program. So it really all depends on a producer's specific situation and precisely how the application and payment calculations may work out for them. But again, some of these things we can't really say until, after a producer, actually submits that application and then kind of takes a step from there. But generally, once you fill out the application and you looked at the revenues or you've already taken a look at your finances to kind of see where you may or may not be, then that might guide some of those decisions for producers. But again, those online tools, those will be exceptionally helpful as well for producers in being able to determine if there's a possibility for a payment to calculate.
Okay. All right, here's the next slide here. It's all producers who receive ERP phase 2 payments must purchase crop insurance or NAP coverage where crop insurance is not available within the next two available crop years as determined by the secretary. So did want to point that out, and I'm pretty sure Joshua, you want to elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Now producers, they might also hear this referred to as a linkage requirement. And so generally, as you stated, producers, they'll either have to get crop insurance or NAP coverage for the next 2 years. the crop insurance program that's administered through the risk management agency, and they work through a network of approved insurance providers, provide insurance for crops through the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation. Producers can check with them to see what types of coverage may be available for their operations, and then be able to kind of work with those agents to determine what levels of coverage make sense for them. Now, FSA comes into play with the NAP program, or the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. That program is available for crops in which the risk management agency does not offer coverage for. Depending on where you are located here in the state, some crops are covered by RMA in some counties, and then RMA may not cover the same crop in another county. And so it really becomes county specific. Producers that do need to get NAP coverage, there are sales closing deadlines throughout the year, and it all depends on what type of crops producers are doing when those sales closing deadlines are. And so for producers that do apply, they'll have to be sure to be in touch with their local office to get that process done. For the NAP program, there is an administrative fee of $325 per crop that is associated for the candidate is charged to the producer. For producers that have multiple crops, then it's a maximum of $825 per administrative county. And then if producers operating multiple counties, then there's a maximum fee of $1,950 that could be assessed. Now, for producers that qualify as under one of our historically underserved categories, then that fee for basic level coverage can be waived. So at that point, it's essential to getting a free policy for those that are eligible for it. And so those would be our social disadvantaged producers, our limited resource, our beginning farmer and rancher, and our limited veteran farmer and rancher groups. Those same underserved producers, they are also eligible to get a 50% premium reduction if they are eligible to get buyout coverage or additional coverage on crops that they may grow. And so depending again on what producer's particular situation, depends on the levels of NAP coverage that they may receive. But just do know that if you do sign up for both for this program, then you'll either be required to either get federal crop insurance or to enroll in the NAP program.
Right. And can you quickly just tell us what NAP stands for?
Yes. So NAP, it's the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. Okay. And so it's similar to crop insurance, but it's just done through FSA. But that's what that acronym stands for.
All right. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. All right. So do I need a farm number prior to the disaster?
No, producers don't need a farm number prior to disaster. So I know a lot, we talked about that producers, they do need that farm number before they can access a lot of our programs, but certainly they don't need to have had it prior to a disaster. I know quite a few of our programs, we do work with producers on this, their first time coming into an office, and it ends up being after a disaster occurs. And so they don't need a farm number to come in. So if you do need one, your local office on your first visit, they'll work with you to get all of that information needed that they need to set up your records in our systems, and then they can work with you with signing you up for this program and any other programs that are available through FSA. I also take a chance to note that for producers who may have first been in business in 2020, if that would have been their first year, then they may also be eligible for ERP2, depending on the type of losses that they may have had. So there are a few caveats and procedures that we can be able to follow to assist those producers whose first year in operation would have been 2020.
All right. So my next slide, I slipped this in here too, because it's always important. Some of us have worked with Farm Service Agency. Some of us are brand new, so did want to slip this in on what to bring if it in fact is your first visit. We have proof of ID, which is driver's license, social security card, IRS, EIN number are all pieces of documents that are acceptable. Copy of a recorded deed, survey plat, rental lease, agreement of the land, something to basically show that you have control of the land that you're speaking of. You do not have to own the property to participate in these programs, but you do have to have pertinent documentation to show that you do have control of the land there. And also entities such as articles of incorporation, trust, and estate documents for entities. Partnership agreements are also good. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to that there, Joshua.
No, I think you did a good job there.
All right. So once you do have that farm number, they'll register your farm in the FSA. Excuse me. Once you do take the steps to bring in the proper information, FSA will register your farm in the FSA database. And Farm Service Agency, when I say FSA, I have to be careful. We always use those acronyms. Create a map outlining your farm or ranch boundaries with acreage figures, and then they will provide you with a farm number. And this farm number will allow you to access key USDA programs, such as some of the programs that we're talking about here. It also allows you to vote in Farm Service Agency county committee elections, as well as receive routine program notifications hot off the press as they come through. So did I do okay there, Joshua?
Yes, sir. You did just good. Might need to offer you a job after the day.
I know, man. I'm getting dangerous here. All right, so we touched on that, and I see a couple questions in the Q&A. We're going to hit those at the tail end, but I do want to take a moment to encourage anyone, if you do have questions, please put it in the Q&A, and we'll be doing a question and answering session at the tail end here. But we're almost through. We wanted to hit the PART program real quick, which also PART meaning Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. Again, sign up is open through June 2nd of this year. So we, basically have a week or so to make this thing happen, a little bit over a week, I should say. So with the hope that maybe we get some notification that they extend it, but I do not want us hanging our hat on that at all. So that's why we've felt it was important to have this event as soon as possible. So anyway, what are some of the highlights? Let's hit on some of the highlights of the Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. Now, also known as PARP, and PARP offers financial assistance to aid producers due to negative market impacts caused by the global pandemic. So this one's a little bit different than the winter storms and some of the other disaster stuff that we're talking about. It's meant to really serve as a gap coverage, as previous programs looked at price, loss, or lack of market access. So didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on this a little bit more, or for me to keep moving here, Joshua.
No, I think we're good here.
Okay. Now, what are the eligible commodities for the PART program? Now for PART, they have some of the eligible ag commodities include crops, aquaculture, livestock byproducts, or other animals or animal byproducts that are produced as part of a farming operation. And that may be intended to be, sold commercially and marketed commercially. Now, here are the following commodities that are not PRP or PARP eligible: wild, free roaming animals, horses and other animals used or intended to be used for racing or wagering, aquatic species that do not meet the definition of aquaculture, and cannabis sativa, I always mess that name, non-hemp cannabis, and any part of the plant that does not meet the definition of hemp. Also, timber is included as an ineligible commodity as well on this. So those things are important to know, and I will let you kind of interject a little bit more here, Joshua.
Yeah, sure. So with pretty much non-aquatic species, so I doubt that we'll probably have a lot of those on the call, but generally if they don't meet the definition of aquaculture as FSA defines it, then it'll be ineligible as an aquatic species. And so generally, aquaculture is any species of aquatic organisms that are grown as food for human or livestock consumption or for industrial or biomass uses. It can also include fish that are raised as feed for fish that are consumed by humans, and then any ornamental fish that might be grown in some type of aquatic environment. And then also regarding hemp, because I know you went a little bit into it there, and I do know we have some producers that may be growing hemp. And so generally, again, hemp, it is one of those plant species of cannabis sativa ale. And so that includes any part of the plant with a delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. And it also has to be grown under license, and then any other required authorities that kind of follow along with that as well. And so anything that falls outside of that definition for hemp or that definition for aquaculture would be ineligible for the PART program.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Now, here's some of the highlights of the PART program, the Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. It will use tax documents such as your Schedule F or other appropriate tax forms as a form of reference on your allowable gross revenue. Payment formula takes into account other pandemic program payments received as well. So keep that in mind. Most crops and livestock are eligible. Again, something different than the emergency relief program that we talked about for those cattle producers out there and livestock producers. Payments are not awarded until after application period closes, and payments may be factored. So those are some of the key highlights there. All right. So again, wanted to point out for the PART program, some of the tools, the online tools, again, if you want to go in and kind of get a snapshot of how you may fall into that based on your revenue. It is worth noting that similar to the ERP2, the Schedule F, your 1040 that's on your tax returns is a document that most individuals and entities use as to report farm income, and may be a great source of reference for you. But again, not something, if you do not, you're not required to use that Schedule F. There's other ways around it, as Joshua talked about earlier. So with that, I do want to provide a few links here. I know it's always tough when you see a slide with these type of links on it. I do encourage you to either take a screenshot of it or take your cell phone and take a quick picture of it. But these are some of the sources there where you can find some more information. And we'll probably at this point, I'm gonna leave this screen up just for a second in case anybody needs to grab these links, or maybe we'll try to put some of those in the chat as well. I don't know if that's a possibility, but what we'll do now is get into the Q&A, and just keep in mind, we're also sending this recording out to you. So if you don't grab these links now, don't worry, within the next day or so, we'll have the recording link out to you. So with that said, I do want to open it up for some questions. I see I'll start with some in the Q&A here, Joshua, because I know folks have been waiting patiently. I'll start with one that came in early on, about 10 minutes into the presentation. It says, does wildlife conservation come into play with the programs available?
And I think I might need a little bit more clarification on that question. Because if it's regarding a program payment that might be received through FSA, then it's possible that it may count as an eligible revenue. But I'm not sure if might have been asked about if there are additional programs for wildlife conservation. Okay, so I'm going to unmute the name. I think it's and see if you can you elaborate on that question a little bit for Joshua?
Oh, if they're still there. All right, I guess we'll have to trying to hello.
Yeah, it looks like they came off mute, but I can't hear them on my end.
Okay. We'll move
Okay.
on.
Okay. They clarified they don't sell products, but they establish them. If I guess the question is regarding if USDA or FSA has programs that can assist with wildlife conservation. It depends. I know through FSA, through a couple of conservation reserve programs, we do have some that focus on trying to maintain and restore habitat for some endangered species in a couple areas of the state. And so that might be some opportunity through the Conservation Reserve Program. But then I believe the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, they may also do some programs through their agency where they may be able to work with producers on wildlife conservation plans through what they have available.
All right. All right, let's get to the next question. It says, if I'm a new farmer with little prior year sales and Winter Storm Uri kills all my crops for my first growing year, do I qualify?
So you may qualify for this program, and I think I think we mentioned earlier that for ERP2, for producers that did not, or 2020 was their first year in production, they wouldn't have any 2018 or 2019 revenue or records to refer to. And so there are adjustments that can be made to the expected revenue that a producer would have made in 2020. That application tool for ERP online, it does ask a few questions and can assist with determining what an adjustment could be for applicable producers that fall into that situation. So definitely take a look at the tool that's available online and plug in information and data there, and it'll help you generate that 521 application with that adjustment that should apply for 2020 being that first year in production.
All right. Great question, y'all. Here's another one. It says, how can a farm established with FSA, Farm Service AG, under person be converted to an entity ownership like an LLC?
So with that, and I think it gets a little bit into our payment eligibility determinations, which we didn't get a lot into today. But I think I'll start there with, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So with FSA, producers generally tell us and certify to us how you're running your operation. And so if you start your operation as a person and at any point you will be changing over to an LLC, then once that transition is completed, then you'll need to go into your local FSA office, and then they'll work with you in completing the appropriate farm operating plans. So we can capture that information and then make payment eligibility determinations for the LLC. Now, I think also with that, again, FSA, we're, I guess, not in the business of structuring or establishing those types of entities for producers. And so that's generally something that the producers take on themselves. And so we just make sure that however the producer is actually running their farming operation, that they are certifying to FSA how they're doing that, so that way we can appropriately make their payment eligibility determinations and program eligibility determinations based on that information. And so if you're currently operating as a person and you have a farm operating plan and things with us, you're good to go. But once you get that LLC established and you start operating under that, get in touch with your local FSA office, and then they can work with you to get those forms completed and get everything set up under the LLC.
All right. Okay, and here's another question, might challenge you a little bit. It says, how do you apply for loan forgiveness?
So with the loan forgiveness, under the American Rescue Plan, which was passed back in 2020, there were some provisions in there, 2021, there were some provisions in there that allow for FSA to make debt payments to eligible borrowers under the authorities that were issued then. That those authorities were repealed in the Inflation Reduction Act in Section 22006, and it was replaced with assistance to distressed borrowers. The assistance to distressed borrowers started to roll out last year, and so with those, it generally was not a full paying off of loans for those producers, but to kind of get them caught up from some of the impacts that were associated with the pandemic. Last fall, FSA began rolling out the first round of that assistance to producers. And so it targeted assistance to those direct loan borrowers that we had currently that were past due on their loans. And it also provided assistance to those who may have had a restructure on their loans, and then those that had loans where their interest exceeded their debt by a certain, their interest exceeded their total principal remained on their accounts. And so those portions of the assistance are still forthcoming on the round two. Round one last year covered about 11,000 producers that were still 60 or more days delinquent on their FSA direct loans. And then they also made payments to about 2,100 borrowers who had their loan collateral liquidated, but they still had a debt due on those loans that they had through FSA. And so there aren't any provisions now under which FSA can make payments necessarily under loan forgiveness. And so, but they are under those two forms of assistance for distressed borrowers for those that have existing loans through the Farm Service Agency. Now, in addition to that, under Section 22007 of the Inflation Reduction Act, it authorized USDA to make payments to producers who experience discrimination in USDA's farm loan programs. The sign-up period and additional information for this program is still forthcoming. So FSA and USDA have not rolled out that program yet. So there is not an application that's available for producers to apply for it. But the information will be forthcoming at a later date. But for producers that do want to keep up with any of this information or read a little bit more about it, there is information that is available on farmers.gov. And so it includes kind of a timeline up to when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed up to kind of where we are now. And then any of the updates that do come down at a future date, then all the information will be posted and made available there as well.
Wow, thanks so much, Joshua. Man, it's man, you're a blessing to be able to just have you're just like a walking, talking resource encyclopedia for Farm Service Agency. They're lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you here in Texas, man. I got one last parting question. This is for everybody involved, is that if one of us or all of us heard something that said, you know, hey, this may be for me, what's the next step? What should I do as a farmer to see if these programs actually apply to me?
So definitely, so for those of you that are on the call and you do have questions, definitely I encourage you to visit FSA's website. That's where the information for the Emergency Relief Program is housed, and farmers.gov houses the information for the PARP program or the Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program. So definitely take advantage of both of those tools that are available if you can access those, and click around there, follow the instructions that are included there to see if either or both of those programs may be able to assist your operation. Definitely, if you do have additional questions after that, we encourage you all to call your local FSA office to ask those questions and to set up an appointment to either complete an application or submit an application. Most of our offices are operating on an appointment type operation style. And so they definitely want you to make an appointment before you come in, just so that way they can make the best use of your time and then get as much done during that visit while you are there, so they can be prepared for you and try to get everything done in that same visit while you're there at the office. And so definitely, again, take advantage of those tools that are available online. But if you have additional questions, reach out to your local FSA office and they'll be more than happy to help out.
All right, well, that'll do it. So thank you everyone for joining us today. That concludes our info session. And as Joshua said, please take that next step. reach out. We've got a short window here unless we hear otherwise. And, thank you so much again for taking time out of your evening to join us. And hopefully this information that isn't going to help you right away will help you in the future, as we always need to be one step ahead in preparing for risks and disasters. So thank you so much. And until next time, we'll see you soon.